The search for the next running backs coach at the University of Texas continues. It's now been 7 days since Tashard Choice informed all of us that he was taking his talents to the Detroit Lions. We've talked about a few replacement candidates on this channel so far, but we haven't talked about this one. And after doing some research, this guy may be nearing the top of my wish list. Who is it? We'll discuss on today's edition of the BK Show. What's up, guys and gals? Welcome in to another edition of the BK Show. This is your one-stop shop for Texas Longhorns content on YouTube. I'm your host, BK Brad Kellner. Please give the video a thumbs up. Please subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already, and make sure to comment below with your thoughts. So we've talked about Rashad Samples at Oregon. We've talked about Carlos Lachlan at Ohio State. Chris Gilbert, who's currently on Steve Sarkisian's staff right now. And we've discussed a few more names who could be in the mix as well. I'm going to throw one more at you here. Keenan Hall, who is currently the running backs coach at Baylor. Now, he's only been at Baylor for 1 year. Before that, he was at SMU in 2022 and 2023. So he's not the biggest name. And again, he's at Baylor right now. So some of these other candidates are at Oregon, Ohio State, Michigan, Florida. Some of these other guys that are being discussed have coached at bigger programs than just Baylor. But there are two boxes that I'm looking to check with this hire. And I think most Longhorn fans agree with me here. I want a recruiter, and I want a guy with a proven track record of development. Those are the two things that I'm looking for, and the two things that I think Steve Sarkisian is looking for. Proven track record of recruiting and a proven track record to develop running backs at the collegiate level. We're going to work backwards here. We'll start with development, and we'll get to the recruiting here in a minute. Last year, there were two Power 4 teams in college football that had a 1,000-yard rusher and a 600-yard rusher. Miami was one of them. The other one was Baylor. And that 1,000-yard rusher was a freshman by the name of Bryson Washington, who set a Baylor freshman record with 1,028 rushing yards. He also had 12 rushing touchdowns as well. And oh, by the way, he did all of that despite missing the first 2 games of the 2024 season. He was named a freshman All-American. He averaged more than 113 all-purpose yards per game. Bryson Washington was a 3-star recruit out of high school. He works with Keenan Hall for 1 year in Waco. He's a freshman All-American, and he did things that no other freshman running back has ever done at Baylor. Not too shabby. And you look at Baylor's overall rushing offense, it ranked 32nd in college football. It's not the best, but Texas's rushing offense ranked 69th in the country. Not as nice as I would have liked it to be. Texas had better backs, and they had a better offensive line. And I'll say this, in 2023, the year before Keenan Hall got to Waco, Baylor's offense ranked 118th in rushing yards per game. Again, last year they were 32nd in the country. That's a jump of 86 spots. I think probably should have brought out the calculator to double check that math, but regardless of if I'm right or not, that's a huge jump. Baylor averaged 81 yards per game more on the ground in 2024 than they did in 2023 when Keenan Hall was coaching at SMU. Speaking of that 2023 SMU season, the Ponies had the 35th ranked rushing offense in America that year. This past year, even though SMU made it to the college football playoff, made it to the ACC championship game, they had a much better team in 2024 than they did the year prior. Well, the rushing offense did not. It fell to 72nd. So the last year Hall was at SMU, it ranked 35th. This past year without Hall, it ranked 72nd. No, by the way, I'll add one more stat here too. SMU in 2023 had the 10th ranked red zone offense in America. Could use that in Austin with some of the red zone struggles this program has had over the last couple of years, especially this past season. So I don't think all of those numbers are coincidental. I don't think Baylor's running game getting that much better with Keenan Hall there is a coincidence. I don't think SMU's running game taking a little bit of a step back without Keenan Hall is a little bit of a coincidence either. I think he deserves some credit. So you've got some development there with some of the guys that he's worked with, and you look at some of the statistics from the rushing offenses that he has coached up, you could see that the numbers are there. Now on to recruiting. This is a huge year for running backs in the state of Texas. A massive year. 4 of the top 5 running backs in the class of 2026 are Texas kids. You'd like to get one, hell, preferably 2 of those guys to sign with Texas when it's all said and done. Keenan Hall is from Dallas, played his high school football at South Oak Cliff, so he's got ties to the Metroplex. He's also coached at SMU and Baylor, so he's recruited the entire state. And those same players that Texas is going after, he's had conversations with those guys at Baylor. Now, those conversations maybe not as long because those kids are getting offers from schools better than Baylor, but it's not like you'd be starting from square one if Keenan Hall took the job in Austin. He's already had conversations with guys like KJ Edwards and Javion Osborne, so the relationship is already kind of there. Again, you hire somebody from the NFL, you're basically starting from scratch. Those guys have never heard from that coach before. They've heard from Keenan Hall before. So he's got ties to the entire state. And you look at Keenan Hall's success as a recruiter. We're talking about a proven track record of being able to do this at a very high level. I don't know how many of y'all keep up with Baylor's recruiting. I really don't. I just looked this up before the video. Baylor just brought in the third-ranked class in the Big 12. That's pretty good. And if you look at the members of that 2025 recruiting class, Keenan Hall was responsible for their top 4 commitments. He was the lead recruiter on their top 4 guys that they just brought in. He was also the lead recruiter of 5 of the top 10 guys that they brought in this most recent cycle. 24/7 Sports graded him as a top 35 recruiter in America this past year. And guys and gals, that's not easy to do at Baylor. That is not easy to do at all, especially considering the fact that Dave Aranda's seat is very hot, and it has been for a couple of years, and it's been pretty easy to negatively recruit Baylor. The fact that this guy was able to bring in some really talented players and give Baylor the third best class in the Big 12, and I know Texas and Oklahoma aren't there anymore, so it makes it a little bit easier to be higher up in those rankings, but still, that's very impressive. Fact that Keenan Hall was able to do that and, again, be responsible for some of the best players that they brought in, that's very, very good. By the way, one of those recruits was the 11th ranked running back in this class of 2025, a guy by the name of Michael Turner, who had offers from places like Oklahoma and Florida, amongst a bunch of other programs that are bigger than Baylor. So, again, 1 year, 1 full cycle at Baylor. He was hugely responsible, despite their coach being on a very hot seat of bringing in the third-ranked class in a Power 4 conference. Keenan Hall also has experience as a recruiting coordinator as well. So he's been a running backs coach at a few different spots, but he's also been a recruiting coordinator too. So he knows the in and outs of what it takes to get a kid to commit. So again, I look at KJ Edwards. I look at Javion Osborne. I look at Jonathan Hatton. I'm thinking an in-state guy can help land those players. A guy who grew up in the Metroplex, a guy who played his high school ball in the Metroplex, a guy who's coached in the Metroplex and coached at a couple of different spots in the Lone Star State. And again, he's already had conversations with those guys from being at Baylor. So you wouldn't be starting from scratch from that regard. And you really want to make sure you lock in, again, at least 1, but preferably 2 of this epically good running back class in the state of Texas in 2026. I was digging through some insider sites as well over the last couple of days. I've seen words like ace recruiter, extensive recruiting ties, recruit favorite. All of those have been used to describe Keenan Hall. So that's what you're looking for, right? That's what we loved about Tashard Choice. Obviously a good developer of talent, but a great recruiter as well, and a guy who had no problem developing and cultivating and developing relationships with high school kids. Seems like Keenan Hall has the ability to do that as well. So he checks both boxes for me. Once again, success in development, success in recruiting as well. Again, not the biggest name, wouldn't be coming from the biggest school, but it's a hire that would really excite me and one that I think a lot of Longhorn fans can get behind as well. What say you? Comment below with your thoughts. Would you be on board with Keenan Hall being the next running backs coach at Texas? Is there somebody that you would rather have? Look, if Texas can go get a Rashad Samples, I'm in favor of that because I think his track record of recruiting and development is better than Keenan Hall's. But if you can't poach Rashad Samples away from Oregon, then Keenan Hall might not be a bad contingency plan. And again, I think he does just about everything you would want a good running backs coach to do. It's been 7 days since Tashard Choice left. We're all waiting on pins and needles to see who Steve Sarkisian hires. We'll see if he drags this thing out a little bit longer. I did see and I went back and found this, that it took 14 days for Texas to hire Tashard Choice after Stan Drayton left to become the head coach at Temple in 2022. So we might not get an answer just yet. This is a highly coveted job. Steve Sarkisian's doing his research. I have no problem with that. I hope he's having as many conversations as he possibly can to make sure he hires the right guy for this gig. But it's a highly coveted one, and Texas is going to get a lot of interest from a lot of big name coaches from around college football and the NFL. Keenan Hall, a guy that I wouldn't sleep on. We'll see what Steve Sarkisian ends up doing. Appreciate y'all watching. If you made it this far, please give this video a thumbs up, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel as we're on the race to 2,000 subs right here on the BK Show. We'll be back to do it again tomorrow. Appreciate y'all watching. Remember, when you watch the BK Show, you rule. Y'all have a good one. Hook 'em.